we have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And you know, is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
The real Ronald Reagan helped the real Saddam Hussein use chemical weapons, including sarin. In 1991, after the Gulf War, UN weapons inspectors found all kinds of things in Iraq made by U.S. manufacturers, chemicals, missile components, computers, all sorts of stuff. And in 1994, the Senate Banking Committee turned up dozens of biological agents shipped to Iraq during the mid-1980s under license from the Commerce Department.
Now, probably a lot of you know that Saddam has been our boy for a very, very long time. You may remember Abdul Karim Qasim, who was president of Iraq in the early 60s. Qasim came up with a unique concept. He said, Iraqi oil ought to go to benefit the Iraqi people. How novel is that? But we didn't like that very much. He began to tax the oil companies, particularly the British and some American companies, and threatened to nationalize our oil companies. And so we decided that Qasim had to go. The CIA sent an assassination team. It was headed by a man who was still going through high school, an Iraqi citizen who was still going through high school. They riddled Qasim's car with bullets on the streets of Baghdad and missed him. The head of this assassination team was wounded and fled to Syria. His name was Saddam Hussein. He was a CIA agent in those days, an assassin for us. He failed. He was our boy. He was our man. And so, we sold him and gave him a lot of tanks. We built him, Bechtel built him big chemical, I don't know, my father-in-law was chief architect at Bechtel, built Saddam big chemical plants that were used, and we knew that they were used to make mustard gas and other chemical weapons that were being employed against the Kurds and later the Iranians. We knew this, but we sold him these things. You have to remember that Middle Eastern oil is the oil that's used by a great deal of Europe, and China, and Japan. If we control Middle Eastern oil, we control our biggest potential competitors, Japan, China, Europe. So it's very important.
The Arab states have been controlling their own oil fields, but have still continued to sell their oil for US dollars. And where do the oil producers bank their dollars? America. It's called the petrodollar cycle.
After the petrodollar recycling system was implemented, 70% of Saudi Arabia's entire wealth was in one account in the Federal Reserve of New York. And that implemented a system where we kept the Saudis in power, they got rich, and we had an unlimited credit card.
And that's the dark side of the dollar conspiracy, and how America has been carving up the oil industry for years. It's not only the oil producers who have to sell in dollars. Buyers can only pay for oil in dollars as well. And if you don't have dollars, how do you get them? You exchange your goods and services for them. All America has to do is print them. As long as oil is traded in dollars and the US can print them for nothing, then it has its very own money tree. But what happens when the US cannot print those dollars fast enough to keep up with the huge amounts of imports it needs to survive? America is now importing more goods than it can pay for. So by continuing to print more and more dollars, its debt is reaching a dangerous all-time high. Even with petrodollars, it's still having to borrow from former enemies. Some believe that the once mighty dollar is now under threat. So perhaps it's this dependence on dollars, generated by oil, that was the reason the US went into Iraq. The whole US position in the world relies on the petrodollar, and if that should change, it could be a reason for a conspiracy to go to war.
The United States knows that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. Any country on the face of the earth with an active intelligence program knows that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction.
There is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction. There is no doubt that he is amassing them to use against our friends, against our allies, and against us.
The choice is his. And if he does not disarm, the United States of America will lead a coalition and disarm him in the name of peace. Saddam Hussein aids and protects terrorists, including members of Al-Qaeda. Secretly and without fingerprints, he could provide one of his hidden weapons to terrorists or help them develop their own. Before September the 11th, many in the world believed that Saddam Hussein could be contained. The war on terror is, you can't distinguish between Al-Qaeda and Saddam when you talk about the war on terror. We've learned that Iraq has trained Al-Qaeda members in bomb making and poisons and deadly gases. He's a threat because he is dealing with Al-Qaeda. We know that Iraq and Al-Qaeda have had high-level contacts.
He has not developed any significant capability with respect to weapons of mass destruction. He is unable to project conventional power against his neighbors.
We are able to keep arms from him. His military forces have not been rebuilt.
It appears that there were not weapons of mass destruction there.
You said you knew where they were.
I did not.
We know where they are. They're in the area around Tikrit and Baghdad and east, west, south, and north somewhat.
You said you knew where they were, near Tikrit, near Baghdad, and north, east, south, and west of there. Those are your words.
My words were...
We know where they are. They're in the area around Tikrit and Baghdad and east, west, south, and north somewhat.
Senator's got his facts wrong. I have not suggested there's a connection between Iraq and 9/11.
With respect to 9/11, of course, you've had the story that's been public out there. The Czechs alleged that Mohammed Atta, the lead attacker, met in Prague with a senior Iraqi intelligence official 5 months before the attack.
First, just if I might correct a misperception, I don't think we ever said, at least I know I didn't say, that there was a direct connection between September the 11th and Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein aids and protects terrorists, including members of Al-Qaeda.
You have said in the past that it was, quote, pretty well confirmed.
No, I never said that.
Okay. I
never
think
said
that is...
No, it's absolutely not. What I said was...
It's been pretty well confirmed that he did go to Prague and he did meet with a senior official of the Iraqi intelligence service.
The reason I keep insisting that there was a relationship between Iraq and Saddam and Al-Qaeda, because there was a relationship between Iraq and Al-Qaeda. What did Iraq have to do with what?
The attack on the World Trade Center.
Nothing.
Ronald Reagan didn't just look the other way when Saddam used chemical weapons. He sold the stuff to Saddam. The President of the United States was Saddam Hussein's drug dealer. Michael Dodd reported, according to several former officials, the State and Commerce Departments promoted trade in such items as a way to boost U.S. exports and acquire political leverage over Hussein. Another brilliant Reagan strategy that worked out just beautifully, didn't it? Recently declassified documents also show that during the final days of the Reagan administration, the United States learned through satellite imagery that Iran was about to gain a major strategic advantage by exploiting a hole in Iraqi defenses. U.S. intelligence officials conveyed the location of the Iranian troops to Iraq, fully aware that Hussein's military would attack with chemical weapons, including sarin, a lethal nerve agent.